And welcome back to Janky AF and Year of the Aerostar, episode number 138. Well, it has been far too long. It's been over a month since we released a video at all here on Janky AF, and even longer, close to 2 months since a Year of the Aerostar. Now that is a shameful embarrassment for me, but as I'll get into in my janky life, things have just been a little bit busy. It's summer, so it's high season for working, unfortunately, and not driving Aerostars for some people. For some others, maybe not so much, and we're going to try to live vicariously a little bit today. I don't want to make any promises because the whole idea was to do 2 of these a week long ago. We're here where we are, but we're live. Well, this is pre-recorded, but we are still here making videos about Ford Aerostars, and that's all anyone can hope for. So we should probably just get on with it, and I try to under-promise and over-deliver, so I won't promise anything, and hopefully there'll be more videos soon. Anywho, without further ado, here we have a 1997 Ford Aerostar XLT Sport 80K listed for $6,000, and apparently it's in stock. I'm not sure how that gets in there. In Southampton, New York, the Hamptons. We're going to the Hamptons to look at, an Aerostar fitting of the Hamptons, quite honestly. And this photo you see here will definitely be the thumbnail. This is an incredible shot. It looks so good on the beach with the clouds, with a surfboard or paddleboard, whatever it is on top. And the color, which we'll get to now. I've tried really hard. I got my color matching shirt and I got the Ford hat back. So we're trying to really, do a reset here on Janky AF with full steam behind us. So a very short and sweet description here. Condition used like new. Florida vehicle, very good condition, no rust, Portofino Blue. And I have 2 bench seats in mint condition. The fact that they know the color name, to me, is such a good indication of the care that's been taken on this vehicle. It is indeed Portofino Blue. It is a sport version, and we're going to get all into the sort of, particulars of it in a second here. But just the fact that they know the color code, the factory color code of the vehicle, to me is such a good sign, because it shows that someone bothered to figure out what that was, or research it, or just knew it. Now, Portofino Blue is such an interesting color because I feel like this light blue, I'm not sure if it was the original light blue used on early Aerostars, this sort of sky blue. I believe our good buddy Crease Mert, I think his is Portofino Blue. I could be wrong about that because they did a lot of subtle color alterations. But if you take away the silver stripe on the bottom here, you take away the sort of magenta red sport script and pinstriping, this color would not look quite as elegant. It would look more utilitarian, and a lot of light blues that vehicles were. If you ever watch the X-Files, it's great 90s car spotting because there's so many, every episode there's a different Ford Taurus or Mercury Grand Marquis or Crown Victoria or some square body Buick. There's so many just sedans in that. And then there's IMDb, and then there's IMCDB or something like that. It's like IMDb for cars, and you would not believe how many motion pictures the Ford Aerostar is in. I'll give a good shout out to my buddy Mike, who every time he sees an Aerostar on TV, he sends me a clip of it, and it's amazing how many Aerostars he finds, but also how much TV he watches. Or maybe it's so saturated and ubiquitous, the Aerostar on the motion picture screen, that it's just, you can't get away from it. Anywho, we're getting way off track. Let's get into some sort of nuts and bolts here, because before we look at any more pictures, now a couple really interesting things about this, and I was going to go in and try to actually contribute to the Ford Aerostar Wikipedia page, but it seems like people are always updating this, because it seems like we've had a big debate here on the fascinating thing about the Aerostar. It ran for 12 years, from 86 to 97. And next year, shout out to my friend Todd, well, he reminded me, next year will be the 40th anniversary of the introduction of the Aerostar. So that's pretty cool. And being, the steward of a 1986 Aerostar myself, that's going to be a momentous occasion. Now, maybe we can actually get that vehicle in, good condition, respectable of an anniversary by that time. We'll see. But I always was under the impression that the sports didn't run all the way through 97. And if we do a quick look, so we'll tease you on some of these photos. This does have the Sport, the 1997 taillights. Now I know you can retrofit these. I believe Chris Mert actually, I think his is a 97 that he backdated with non-97 lights, or is it the other way around? I think it's a non-97 that he put 97 lights on. And I think there actually is some sort of small retrofit, some sort of difference with the amount of holes and how they plug in. If any of you know, you can let me know in the comments. And Janky, do thank you to everybody. I've actually, even though I haven't been releasing any videos, I've still gained subscribers. I'm still getting tons of comments. So Janky, do thank you. I really appreciate that. I have to respond to all your comments. And then sometimes I respond and you respond back. So I have to respond to those responses. We're working on it. We're doing the best we can with what we got. So I just appreciate everybody's patience. So anyways, this appears to be a true 97 Sport, which is interesting because if you go to the Wikipedia page, Aerostar Sport 92 through 96, and this is of course the very famous, I should make a shirt. I want to, I got big ideas here for doing merch again and all that. But the Aerostar Sport was largely a cosmetic upgrade. I love this. I want to put just that clip on a shirt because it's such a, and here we see a Portofino Blue Sport. It was an entirely a cosmetic upgrade. There was nothing, the aerodynamics was probably actually hurt by the body kit. Of course, I have my 93 Sport that I want to convert to a manual. And then I feel like, because it's a manual transmission, because they didn't make the Sports in a manual, as far as I know. You never know, we can find these sort of unicorns out there. But that, to me, would be a largely cosmetic upgrade, because it's still largely cosmetic, but it wouldn't be entirely cosmetic. So I think this is such a funny phrase. It's so generous. Largely a cosmetic upgrade. It's as Jay Leno would say, it's hilarious. Okay, so that's the one thing. The other thing, while we're on the subject, is I was always under the impression, partly due to Wikipedia's page, that the 3-liter did not come into play until 1988. And for 1986 and 1987, it was only the 2.3 4-cylinder fuel injected, as we all know, the famous Lima, and then the Cologne V6, which was at that point 2.8 liters. Now, the funny thing is, and my 1990, my newest acquisition that I've barely even teased you with, is a 1990, but it was upgraded to the 4.0. But what I never realized is the 4.0 and the 2.8 are basically the same engine. If you look at the history of the Cologne V6, it's amazing how many iterations it went through, and they kept making it bigger and bigger displacement. So there's a kind of, you can, the people who are truly mechanically inclined, you can argue with me on whether it's the same or not, but as I understand it, it's sort of, and it even says on Wikipedia, Cologne, they just kept making the displacement bigger and bigger. And this is the overhead valve. And then eventually I think they went to a single overhead cam in the 4.0, and that came into Explorers and everything like that. So I think if you want to swap a manual transmission into the overhead valve 4.0, it's a very narrow range of vehicles that you can find. I think the 2-door Explorer in the early years of that, whatever generation that was, Explorer with the manual, and then some Rangers, but a lot of Rangers didn't get the overhead valve. They got the single overhead cam. So there's a lot of minutia here. But anyways, now this does say in notes, under the Cologne, the 2.8, shared with Ranger and Bronco 2, this engine was used only for the first few months of 1986 production. And it says citation needed, which is interesting, needs references to reliable sources. This is August 2021, so I guess that was updated a while ago. But I think this is correct, and Janky do thanky to whoever put this little note in here, because we've seen a number of 1986 Aerostars that seem to have the 3.0 in them. And that was very interesting to me, because this seemed like, how is this possible? Was it, put in there after the fact? And it seems like the Cologne V6, the 2.8, was only used because the 3.0 wasn't quite ready. And I think that or they wanted to introduce the 3.0 in the Taurus and not the Aerostar, because the Taurus was a huge deal. It was a revolutionary car at the time. It was seen as very European and competing with Audi, even being better than the European marques. The futuristic styling. Now, of course, the minivan always getting the short end of the stick. For some reason, minivans are just culturally very polarizing. A lot of people don't like them. And so maybe they didn't want to debut, I think I've read this, they didn't want to debut the 3.0 in the Aerostar, so then the Taurus came out, and then after that was up and running, or maybe it was just an engineering thing. Eventually they seemed to move the 3.0 into the Aerostar. Maybe that was the plan the whole time, but they just stuck the 2.8 in it, you know, to sort of get it up and running, because originally the Aerostar was supposed to come out in 85, it was delayed. A shout out to myself here. If you haven't watched my Cybertruck Aerostar video, I think it's really worth a watch. You know, I'm bleeding heart here. I feel like Matt Farah complaining about nobody watching his videos. But I really think that's I'm so proud of that video. It's like a 3,000 or 4,000 word essay that I wrote and researched. And as the Cybertruck continues its like sort of awkward, clunky path into automotive history, and as the sales numbers dwindle, I think it is going to become this weird niche vehicle that in 20 or 30 years is going to be appreciated more now, once all the sort of brouhaha of, you know, Elon and all that stuff sort of hopefully fades away. And the vehicle can just be looked at as a vehicle. Of course, it'll always have context to it, but I think that there's just so many fascinating comparisons between those two vehicles. And really what I say in the video is it's sort of an excuse to spam you with Aerostar facts under the guise of talking about the Cybertruck. So if you haven't watched that, I recommend it. Very biased and subjective manner. Okay, so I was doing some, research, as I'm always doing, and I found this advertisement. I think I gotta buy this off eBay, but it's about the 1986 Aerostar, and the funny thing is here, maybe I could use this as a reference for this Wikipedia. Aerostar now offers an advanced 3.0 liter V6. This performer has multi-port fuel injection, and it packs 145 horsepower, 39% more than Caravan and Voyager. A modern fuel-injected 2.34 is standard. So even in this advertisement for the new leader of the pack, I believe it's still in its first year, but for May and June 86, Ford Aerostar is outsold. So this is got to be from the 1986-1987 era, and they're talking about how it already has the 3.0. It's now offers, which would seem to indicate that it didn't offer it originally, even though it did originally offer a V6. So that seems to be proof positive that Ford was, aside from the obvious examples that we have, but those could also always have been retrofitted in theory. This seems to be, the best, evidence from Ford through their marketing that the 3.0 was offered in 1986 model year. So I thought that was kind of a cool little piece of evidence. So there we go, the deep down the rabbit hole. But let's look at this specific one. So the other thing we were talking about is how it appears that in 97, this is maybe something we can add to the Wikipedia, that the Sport was still offered in 1997. I don't know why they would go through all the trouble to change the taillights to a 97 model from a 96 and then list it as a 97. Obviously, we'd have to get the VIN to really prove this. And the fact that they know the color, but why would they say it's a 97? If they're gonna, why wouldn't you say 96 and we updated the taillights? It seems like this is probably a 97 Sport. Now the funny thing about the Sports is that on darker colors they would paint it. The grille would match the main color of the body of the vehicle, and the headlight bezels and all that. So there's a picture out there, I've never seen one in real life, but there's a pretty famous picture out there of a silver Aerostar Sport, which is so interesting because that's the only monochromatic Sport you will ever see, because the silver matches the sort of bottom silver that all these Sports were done in, the two-tone. And reds and greens, like my Cayman Green Metallic, they painted the bumpers to match. And I think there is even some black Aerostar Sports, which look absolutely incredible. And I think those have the body matched bumper as well. On lighter color Aerostars, and this makes no sense to me. Also, I've never seen a white Sport. Can you imagine a white Sport and how cool that would look? They kept the grille silver, which is so odd to me. Like, why wouldn't you paint the grille Portofino Blue to match it? Why? And then so when they say lighter colors, I think the only lighter colors that were done were this Portofino Blue and the silver bumpers. I think black, silver, Portofino Blue, Cayman Green Metallic, and the red. And there's a lot of weird reds with Aerostar. It always was subtly changing, but it was always basically, you know, sort of a, not quite a maroon, but a darker red than like a barn or a fire engine red, which I wish they did a fire engine red. Neither here nor there. So it's weird that they wouldn't paint. So then because the silver was sort of monochromatic, it kind of was body colored matched because the silver was all over the rest of the vehicle, the lower portions as well as the main upper portion of the body. So that would mean the Portofino Blue, in this theory I have, is the only Sport Aerostar that actually doesn't have the bump, the grille colored as the same, and the headlight bezels colored the same as the main body color of the vehicle, which is just such a weird, fascinating little decision by Ford at the time. However, you know, I'd like to see the grille painted the Portofino Blue as well, and obviously you could always retrofit it, take the grille out, take the headlight bezels out, and paint all those Portofino Blue, and I think it would look quite stunning, but it doesn't really take away from it here at all to me either. Maybe the light colors just, you don't notice it as much, so maybe that was Ford's thinking. Anywho, fantastic looking vehicle. As it seems to have no rust, as they indicate in the description. We'll see the tiny little ding here, but you see the sun hitting it and how this Portofino Blue is brilliant. It's beautiful because it almost does have like a violet purplish color to it, and that works really well with sort of the purplish. This is a red, but it's almost sort of like a magenta. And so that striping works really well on the against both the red and the blue sort of have some purple in them. So it's just a beautiful color. I really like this color. You can see it here. When the light hits it different every time. Here it looks even almost more violet and purple. But then you see it sort of in lower light and it's not quite as brilliant. It almost looks like pretty much just a straight sky blue. We have your gray seats. I think most of the Sports got the gray interior, maybe all, and I think they all did not get any piping. I don't think I've ever seen a Sport that has piping on the seats. It's just the straight gray, which is, you know, monochromatic and beautiful. Obviously, even though they're all gray, it still is two-tone in terms of fabric. I talk about this a lot in this program. Another funny thing about this, I think people have made this in comments, or maybe I've seen it on Bring a Trailer, but the passenger seat in the Aerostar, which is so funny, did not move front or back. You have this little jog dial right here to recline the seat, but I don't think this seat slid. And I think that has something to do with the storage compartment under it. And maybe having a storage compartment under it, which is very nice, but the trade-off was the seat wouldn't move backwards or forwards, which is just such a, for all the, you know, amenities that the Aerostar offered, it's funny that it seems like a very standard thing in a vehicle that it didn't have. You can see your little door cards here were also in this like sort of secondary fabric. And we do have power windows and locks in this Aerostar, which is somewhat unique because even though the Sport was like a package, like an upgrade package, a lot of Sports I see do have crank windows in them. Now, of course, in the early 90s, mid 90s, that was much more common in a vehicle, but it's funny, and maybe that is really the Sport feature, right? Because in a sporting car, an old school sporting car, it's all about weight, and so you got to figure the crank windows save some weight over the power windows with all the motors and actuators in them. So maybe you could claim that was part of the non-appearance upgrade. However, this one does have power windows, so that would make that sort of a moot point. Now we do have some sort of little, foam floor in here. It looks like this was used as like sort of a beach vehicle with the thing on the top. Excuse me, and that would, it says they do have the seats, two bench seats in mint condition, so you are getting those seats if you do want to haul people if you're buying this vehicle. Headliner looks in absolutely wonderful condition. All this plastic that warps and bends and the roof leaks on these things and gets in the windows, that all sort of warps and cracks. That looks in great condition. And it does look like we also have the rear climate control option with the vents built in up here, which is pretty cool. And that makes a lot of sense. I always wondered why the Aerostar had this beam here, because it sort of separates your front and rear headliners, which is nice if you only have to replace one of them. Awful if you have to replace both of them, but maybe that was put in there for the option of the rear climate control, and you can see those vents there, which was another just nice feature of the Aerostar, and more vents back here. And of course your great headphone separate audio system. I guess it's not separate. I don't know. I don't think you can interchange it. I don't think you can listen to two different things. I think you're listening to whatever's going on in the main console. However, the fact that you can put on headphones for the kids, whoever's in the back, you know, a pretty cool technological feat at the time. Maybe not so much in 1997, but when it came out in 1986, very cool indeed. So just a ton of space in these things. My folks are leasing currently, because they're a big EV people, a Hyundai Ioniq 9. Because their Nissan Leaf has some frame issues going on, so they thought they'd test out. And they got a bigger vehicle. You know, they have a grandchild now, and they just, you know, my mom likes to, you know, pick up old projects and stuff like that, furniture, and so they got a bigger vehicle to be able to haul stuff, which I love. But it's funny because I went and measured it, and it's not nearly as wide or as tall as the berth of this Aerostar. So it's just, and it's a 3-row SUV, you know, even like a modern Chevy Suburban. It's so crazy how they have to, for the, I don't know if it's the aerodynamics or whatever, but this whole portion here, they round it off. It's always rounded off at the top here. And it drives me crazy because the Aerostar, as it comes up, actually gets wider. It actually gets wider towards the top. And of course, you could fit plywood in these. Why more vehicles? And boxy vehicles, if you've noticed, have started to come back, like the new Hyundai Santa Fe, even the, you know, the EV. The Kia EV9 and the Hyundai Ioniq 9 are pretty boxy. The new Land Cruiser. Boxy vehicles are kind of coming back, which a lot of people were crying out for, but I still don't think they have the payload berth in the back to really fit, you know, big, bulky, square items, appliances, furniture, stuff like that. So in so many ways, the Aerostar just remains a novel vehicle in terms of its practicality and in terms of its use of space. It's still just such a wonderful vehicle for practicality and a genius of how compact it is. If you look at a modern Aerostar, yes, they're pretty tall, but they're not that wide. They're not that big. They were, you know, designed to be this garageable van, and they really just, it's an amazing use of space. It's amazing efficiency of space for, you know, the overall size of the vehicle relative to how much stuff you can put in them. And you know, for that reason and so many others, I think they just continue to be a relevant vehicle. And, you know, it's like the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Their music's still good after all these years. They're still relevant as a band. And that staying power, which is a great Barry White song, by the way, is just so rare. And, you know, this magical 12-year run just seems to keep on going. And if you buy this vehicle, yes, $6,000, but, you know, a new 3-row SUV, a brand new 3-row SUV, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 for these things. And yeah, sure, they're going to be more reliable. They're going to get probably better gas mileage than an Aerostar gets, or if, you know, if they're electric, obviously that's a different calculation. Maybe a little bit cheaper to run, probably a little bit safer if you're driving at 80 miles an hour. But that brings into the whole conversation of just like, you know, we should all be looking out for each other on the road anyways. But, you know, you still get anti-lock brakes in this thing. You still get airbags in this thing. It's not like, you know, it's not like you're driving a, you know, Duesenberg from 1920 where there's just open air and your, you know, handbrakes outside of the vehicle of the car. Like it's a modern vehicle, you know, relative to most people's standards. It is amazing just in the 20, 30, 40 years since Aerostars came out, how classic and I don't want to say antiquated, but, you know, dated they feel. Like it does feel like you're driving an older vehicle in some respects, but to me they're kind of the sweet spot where you're getting most of the features of a modern vehicle, you know, without the glutton of screens and capacitive touch, like on new Ferraris now. I think they're going away from this finally, but you have a capacitive touch button for your starter, and people complain about it. You're buying like a $300,000-$400,000 car, more than you know, a working middle class person's house costs, and you don't even get the the pleasure of like the engagement of a button, you know, let alone like a key. So the Aerostar brings a lot of those classic qualities that people are pining for, while being extremely affordable. I mean, $6,000, like you look at the price of classic cars, like a 1997 Toyota Supra now was peaking at $120K. Now they've gone back down. I think Supras are really starting to come down, I think. You know, and there's been this sort of correction in the classic car market during the pandemic. Things were going wild, but you could do a lot worse. I mean, look at the surfboard on this, the beautiful color, all the space it has inside. And if you're buying a classic SUV like an old Land Cruiser or a Land Rover, Defender, things like that, you're not really getting, especially if you get an all-wheel drive Aerostar and you could lift it, you're not really getting that much more practicality. You're kind of buying it for the look of it and for the experience and the feel of it. You know, old Land Cruisers, old Land Rovers, yeah, 20, 30, 40K, you know, if they're really in good mechanical condition. Even like Isuzu Troopers, which are really cool. All these like sort of boxy SUVs are very in vogue. And even all the JDM stuff, the Delicas, all that stuff, very, very cool. But I think Aerostars continue to be so slept on, and people think they're ugly. If it's just for the slant nose in the front, I think they're very elegant. It's a very simplistic design. It's very minimalistic in its own way. And again, the way the angles, I always talk about this, but you have this big front-facing angle, and it's not one entire wedge. It's actually, the wedge has a pinch in it. It has a right where your cowl meets the windshield. There are actually two different angles, which it's remarkably similar to the spaceship that they sort of marketed it alongside and sort of was inspired by. I do like the rain gutter guards here too. These things are, people don't like these. I think they're quite practical because if it's raining a little bit, you can still crack your window to get a little bit of fresh air if it's just misting. So you contrast this big sweeping, you know, diagonal line with all the slightly smaller but more in terms of quantity, volumetrically, you get all these little angles headed in the opposite direction, and even your back tailgate is slanted. It's not totally squared off in the back. So the contrast and the sort of tension and release that's given by these different angles moving in opposite directions, even though everything is slipping forward over the front of the vehicle, everything is moving backwards over the rear of the vehicle. And I think that's such a dynamic design. And then obviously everything's very angular on the Aerostar. You have all these horizontal straight lines moving across the body of it, but then you also get this sweeping curve. You know, you have all these triangles and right angles and diagonal lines, but then you get this beautiful sweeping curve alongside your front quarter panel here that just adds some curvature and some balance to the you know, angularity of the rest of the vehicle. So it's just a beautiful, beautiful design. I love the sports. I love the running boards. I love the two-tone. I love the graphics package with your pinstriping. Very 90s. Just a nice little accent to break everything up and to give it that little je ne sais quoi of, you know, aesthetics and color and pop. It's just fantastic. I like these style hubcaps, and they're, you know, these hubcaps really almost usher in what Ford design was going to become, which was very bubbly and round. I love the Contour SVT, the Ford Taurus, and of course the Ford Taurus Show. I love those rounded Tauruses where everything was a bubble. Even your infotainment screen in the middle, or your radio at that time, everything was circular and bulbous, and I like that Ford committed to that. After being so wedgy and angular, they went full round after that, but you're sort of starting to see that already appear in the hubcap design of this vehicle. So it's funny how things move on over time. When the Aerostar came out in '86, you had these boxy silver chrome hubcaps, like these little like moon hubcaps. And even within the 12-year run of the Aerostar, you started to see more curves and round edges. Your seats, I love these seats. These are just some of the greatest seats. They're incredibly comfortable, incredibly supportive. You do ride up pretty high, and so for people that drive SUVs because they like to ride up high, you ride up nice and high. They support you. I love the integrated headrest into them. I think they look great. I think they've aged well. I love the two-tone pattern. The quality of materials, while yes, your dashboard features a lot of plastic, the quality of the seats, really nice fabrics. I like cloth seats. I think they're very elegant. Leather seats obviously a little bit easier to clean, and if they get really dirty, especially in a work vehicle, they're tough to really bring back to a vibrant quality. The carpeting throughout, it's a nice place to be. It's especially when you see one that's all janked up, and we'll get to that in some later episodes, but it's, whatever, it's a work vehicle, but that's the nature of the Aerostar. It was this dual purpose. It could get its hands dirty, and then it could, clean up and take you out to dinner at night. It was just, it's the everything vehicle. And to get back to reference Jay Leno again, he likes cars that are purpose built. He likes cars that do one thing well. And the Aerostar, you could say, is the exact opposite of that, because it kind of does everything okay, but I would argue it kind of does everything well. And so to me, it's always been this unicorn where it's just a vehicle unto itself. There was a singular body design, a singular generation. You could say there were kind of multiple iterations or facelift stuff that happened, but just like the Fiat X19, which is like my favorite little sports car. Oh, it says my memory card's full. So maybe we have to stop recording now, because now I'm going to be on the camera audio, which is not going to sound as good. Always a technicanky difficanky here on Janky AF. Hopefully the video is still recording, because that would be totally screwed if that's not recording. So I guess we'll wrap it up. I've waxed on long enough here. You get the idea. So that is this beautiful 1997 Ford Aerostar XLT Sport, only 80K miles in Portofino Blue, a true gem, located in the Hamptons. So if you're down there on vacation, pick yourself up an Aerostar and enjoy the summer in style and practicality. Okay, there you have it. So nice to be back here on Janky AF and near the Aerostar. We're going to have some more coming soon, I promise. I'm hopefully going to record, a batch of episodes today. So hopefully that'll, be able to release these evergreen episodes and really get churning, because I'm very excited to talk more about the Ford Aerostar, as I always am. Thank you so much for watching. This has been You're the Aerostar here on Janky F. We'll have another one coming for you very soon. And until then, Janky do Thanky.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.